Positive psychology is an important component of our thinking about a modern workplace. And Kim Cameron has been the prime contributor to taking that body of knowledge and applying it to organisations as a whole. It's his name we best associate with the idea of positive organisational scholarship. Kim Cameron is a professor at the University of Michigan, and there he founded the Centre for Positive Organisational Scholarship, now known as the Centre for Positive Organisations. There, his research focuses on how to help organisations to reach high levels of performance and to get the best from the people within them. In 2003, he co-edited a book called Positive Organisational Scholarship: Foundations of a New Discipline, with Jane Dutton and Robert Quinn. This brought together 23 academic papers, and it has continued to grow. It is now the Oxford Handbook of Positive Organisational Scholarship and is a mammoth tome. So, what is positive organisational scholarship? A great way to think of positive organisational scholarship is a systematic study of positive psychology at the level of an organisation. But that won't help you if you don't know what positive psychology is. Well, for many years, psychologists studied how people work, and in particular, what goes wrong with the way that people think. Positive psychology focuses on what happens when people flourish. What it is we do and how we think when we are at our absolute best. And so positive organisational scholarship brings that idea into the organisational level and collates a whole load of interventions and ideas to bring the very best out of people and the organisations within which they work. Putting aside the dry academic language, we find a load of really important topics being studied under the umbrella of positive organisational scholarship that we can see as important in organisational lives. Things like organisational development, leadership, motivation, strengths, resilience, optimism, creativity, ethics, social behaviour, the processes that bring about extraordinary levels of performance, which are referred to as positive deviance, the way we can encourage this, virtuous practices, inquiry into what works, appreciative inquiry, and good organisational citizenship. And for me, at the core of all this is this idea of positive deviance. Most behaviours conform, broadly speaking, to a norm, but outside of that normal range are deviant behaviours, and we tend to give most of our attention to those underperformance deviant behaviours with an intention of trying to crush them. But by crushing deviance, we don't just crush the negative deviance, but also the positive deviance. And yet it's the positive deviance that represents the highest levels of performance. Positive organisational psychology seeks to highlight and accentuate positive deviance. To do this, we need to switch our attention from a bias towards spotting what is negative to a bias towards spotting what is positive. And that is called affirmative bias. We need to focus on what we see as good, worthwhile, inspiring, and motivational. So what do we do about these negative deviances? Well, rather than trying to crush them, we seek to overwrite them with positive behaviours. Let's take a look at 5 really important big ideas that Kim Cameron has been promoting and writing about and researching that are part of the corpus of positive organisational scholarship. And let's take them in an order that builds a story. And the story starts with strengths. In a flourishing organisation, we find people able to do things that play to their strengths, and they're not asked to do things that play to their weaknesses. Not only does working to our strengths produce better performance, it also leads to greater levels of work satisfaction. Where our strengths come from is a matter of debate, but to me, it is beyond debate that by the time we reach adulthood, our strengths are hardwired into us by some combination of our upbringing, our experience, and our genetics. When we learn new skills that play to our strengths, then we acquire talents. And it's talents that contribute to the organisational, to our personal, to the community well-being. When we exercise our talents, we can perform to a high standard and gain a huge amount of satisfaction from doing so. The talent equation says that a talent is the sum of a strength and a skill. And of course, when we exercise our talents properly, we tend to deviate from the norm. We tend to do things in a different way to other people. And that is a positive deviance because we get better results than our peer group. If that norm represents the average behaviour of our peer group, then it's clear that negative deviance, underperformance, is damaging to the organisation. We can all accept that. But the problem that we find is that too many organisations seek to drive people towards the norm. And in doing so, they are squeezing out both negative and positive deviance. So flourishing organisations are those that actively seek out examples of positive deviance and they encourage them. They find ways to make them systematic within the organisation, to train other people to do things in that way, and therefore to shift the norm in the positive direction. Now, in managing people, we can choose how we interact with them. And once again, we find that in too many organisations, interactions are driven by rule sets, policies, perceived norms of behaviour, and ways of doing things. When somebody asks their manager for a concession, some time off, then the first thing that the manager will do is they will look at the rule book. Now, there's nothing in principle wrong with following the rules, acting according to procedure, meeting the requirements of your policies. But what is more important, policies or people? Positive organisational scholarship finds that in the most flourishing organisations, leaders prioritise making virtuous choices rather than correct choices. What we mean by virtuous choices is to choose options that will benefit people and make them feel better. And therefore, successful organisations build cultures that encourage virtuous behaviour. And of course, systematic virtuous practices create employees who are happier. And more importantly, they do not fear the consequences of what they perceive as mindless rule sets. As a result, they are far more likely to go that extra distance to support the managers and leaders who are making those virtuous choices. The cost to the organisation of a team member who has to leave work early to attend to a child's concert or to look after an elderly relative is far less than the value they gain in a grateful, motivated, and flourishing employee. And with that mindset comes the idea of affirmative bias. In any conversation, you will hear people say things that are both positive and negative. When new ideas come up, you will hear criticisms and you will hear support. What affirmative bias is about is recognizing that whilst it is appropriate to challenge ideas, a flourishing organization will create a far more productive culture when the balance of positive contributions is far greater than the amount of negative contributions. When we affirm rather than deny other people's points of view, their ideas and their contributions, then we lift them up. When we're positive and supportive, we get better results than when we're negative and antagonistic. And the research shows that a significant excess of positive over negative contributions to conversations and discussions does have that positive effect. And we do, of course, need to acknowledge that this research does suffer from many of the problems of social science research. Small sample sizes and no replication. But Marcial Lusada and Emily Heapy did do some research. And they found that at the point where the excess of positive over negative comments reaches a ratio of 5:1, you see some form of transformation in the culture of an organisation. Now, I personally would take this 5:1 ratio with a pinch of salt. But what I think is beyond doubt is that when you are overwhelmingly positive rather than negative, you create a culture and an environment where people feel a greater level of confidence. And of course, in that positive culture, it is far easier to challenge thinking rather than people, ideas rather than personalities, and facts rather than opinions. And bringing all this together, we have the idea of positive energy networks, which isn't all new agey as it might sound. Because the fact is, we know that there are some people that make us feel great. We enjoy being around them, especially when they combine a focus on using your strengths, on virtuous practices, on amplifying positive deviance, and having that affirmative bias that makes you feel good about every contribution you make. When you get a few of these people together, they reinforce one another to create a positive energy network. A network of people that it just feels fantastic to be a part of. Not surprisingly, positive energy networks set high goals and then they work together constructively to achieve them. Cameron calls these goals Everest Goals. And what Cameron finds is that people will work harder and take on tasks they really would prefer not to do just to remain a valued part of a positive energy network. So, Kim Cameron, in relentlessly researching positive organisational scholarship and bringing together all of these fantastic ideas, things like talents, affirmative bias, positive deviance, virtuous practice, positive energy networks, and many more, has served us really well. He's taken the study of organisations a huge step forward in allowing us to apply the ideas of positive psychology at the organisational level. And whilst he himself may not be responsible for all or even many of these ideas, I think we can thank him for being the lead editor of the original book that brought the ideas together and for continuing to pursue those ideas and contribute them to us as managers. Please do give us a like if you've learned from this video and enjoyed it. There'll be loads more great management courses content, so please do subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of them. I'll look forward to seeing you in the next one, and in the meantime, keep learning.